Thank you, everyone, for coming. So my name is Brandon Zachary. I'm the rental manager here. I'm joined by John Rutland. John Rutland is a visual storyteller. He's a cinematographer who's gained critical acclaim in the documentary, narrative, and commercial world. He's had a lot of his work as a cinematographer screened at a lot of the film festivals worldwide. He's currently in production on Paranormal Activity. So thank you very much for coming and
Thanks
for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming.
So do you mind just starting kind of basic and kind of starting from where you got your start in filmmaking?
I have like a still photography background. Like I had always done still photography in undergrad and that kind of thing, and then I started out trying to, go for a business degree or something more practical, but then I realized I didn't want to do anything else. So ultimately I just went the film school route. I went to undergrad at the University of Central Florida. You probably haven't heard of it, but then finished there and then went to AFI for cinematography and graduated in 2007, and then have been basically here in LA working, shooting documentaries, commercials, features, that kind of thing. So.
Okay, excellent. Can you tell us some of the projects that you've worked on and that you're working on?
Yeah, I from the UCF connection. UCF is where the guys who did the Blair Witch Project went to school, so they were like 10 years ahead of me. But I, through contacts at UCF, worked with one of the producers of the Blair Witch Project on a really small feature, and then after I graduated from AFI, I was still out here, and they contacted me. They were going to do another feature, Lovely Molly. So that was actually my second feature film coming out of AFI, was with those guys. And then they did another movie in 2012, which was a first-person kind of found footage Bigfoot movie, Exists, that's actually coming out in theaters finally right now. It should be. It has a limited release in October of this month, I think the 24th or something.
Okay.
But so yeah, and then did some feature documentary projects, and then and now I'm on Paranormal Activity. And then I also did a feature last year in Austin, Texas. It was like a romantic comedy, and that was in theaters last month. So.
What was the title?
That's called Believe Me.
Believe Me. Right. Okay. Can I ask how you got on to Paranormal Activity? Like, what was the process for you landing that as the cinematographer?
Basically, so I have an agent, and I went to the meeting with the director for Paranormal Activity through my agent, and basically the Exists film. The director had heard about it and wanted to see it, so I set up a screening at a theater. Because it was also first-person found footage, and it's very specific kind of movie, and especially from a cinematography standpoint, it's kind of a different, whole different animal. So he watched that film and liked it a lot, and I guess liked my work on that and hired me to do Paranormal. So. Okay.
And with Paranormal, it has a specific look to it.
Yeah.
So with this new one, is there what's kind of your process as far as what you want to bring to this new iteration?
This one is a little bit different. They in the story, the characters find this camera, and it I can't give away too much about the film because I signed an NDA, but it basically allows them to see in this other dimension. So there's potential talk about 3D and this kind of stuff for the film, but anyway, they you guys maybe have seen the films, but they're very rough and look like home movies, and a lot of times the actors will operate the cameras, and so that it gives it that kind of first-person rough look. But basically, it's the fifth movie in the franchise, so I've tried to kind of make this one feel like it's of a whole of the other films from a lighting standpoint and the camera work standpoint and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of, the last film was the Marked Ones, and that was kind of a departure from the other paranormal films. And this one also is a bit of a departure, just because of this new element of this camera that they find in the story that, kind of opens up certain things for the characters. So.
Okay. And can we show the photo of the camera as far as the actor's mount? So John brought in just a still of one of them, and I know we'll go over some of the other cameras he's using right now too. But
yeah, so basically we have 9 cameras on the film. We have we have 2 Sony 200s, which is this camera. It's like the newer version of the EX1. And then we have the Sony FS700, which is kind of doubling for this camera that they find in the story. So it's kind of, that's why we did the 35 millimeter sensor size and that kind of thing. And then we have 6 of the a7S's, which are these cameras right here. So. And we're using those in the story as like the security cameras. So if you've seen some of the other movies, they have the, like, you know, at some point in the film, a lot of times will set up these security cameras. So we're using the a7S's as those security cameras. But yeah, this is basically like one of the setups that we have with the camera. This is for when the actors are operating. So we basically just have the PMW 200 with a little shoulder pad, and then we have this single channel wireless follow focus that I hook up to the iris, so that when they're going around the house, I can just sit at the monitor and rack exposure. So, you know, because the auto exposure works, but a lot of times if an actor's standing in front of a blown out window, it'll just expose for the window, and so they'll be silhouetted. So by hooking up the follow focus to the iris, I can basically sit at monitor and rack iris as they walk around the house. Okay. So that's one of the, I guess it's one of the challenges of these kind of movies is like, you know, there's no lights on the floor, there's no, you know, big frames of diffusion and that kind of thing. It's a different beast. So everything is either rigged up in the ceiling or it's lit by practicals.
And the cameras have to be able to free flow pretty much anywhere throughout the set.
Yeah, and so basically like you know, we're shooting in this 2-story house in North Hollywood, and the whole house is a hot set. You know, so they can, in a scene we were shooting actually the other day, it started in like the foyer of the house, and then just without warning went to the kitchen and then the living room, and they were just, you know, going everywhere in the house. So luckily I had this set up, so I was just, you know, racking focus the whole time, or racking iris the whole time. So
yeah, that's nice, and it gives you the liberty to do that too. You know, to move anywhere at any moment.
Yeah, and then I usually will set it up in autofocus, and that has worked really well with the 200. So you know, that way they don't have to worry about focus, and I'm racking the iris. So yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit? Tell us a little bit about the decision-making process for what cameras you guys use, because I know that you did a lot of kind of extensive testing before, you know, in pre-production.
Yeah, we tested a ton of cameras. I think we tested like 10 cameras or something, and it was basically, you know, different rounds of testing, and they had to, you know, we had basically 3 categories of cameras: the, you know, home movie camera that the family uses to film, you know, whatever's going on, and the security cameras, and then this this camera that they find. So it was basically 3 different types of cameras that we were testing. So we did like the VG30, the PMW 200, and on and on. It was a ton of cameras, but we tested the Sony F5, but for that, it looked like too clean and too kind of cinematic and too good, so that kind of ruled itself out for the film. So, but basically, and then for the security cameras, because it's a lot of like night shooting and low light, we tested the SI2K camera, SI2K Mini, and then a couple similar cameras like that. But then actually, like, I think one of the last round of tests that we did, we checked out a few cameras from Abel, and Brandon talked to the first AC and, like, as an afterthought, handed the a7S to us and was like, well, I know what you guys are doing. Maybe you guys should test this. And that turned out to be like basically blew all of our minds. So So we started using that for the security cameras.
And how many of the crew members have now bought the camera?
This is my camera. I bought this. The first AC bought one, the director bought one, and then I think the key grip is buying one this week or something. So.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But yeah, everybody's like crazy about this camera, including myself. But yeah, we're using it. What's that?
Can you hold it up so we can see it?
Yeah.
I can hold your water if you want to.
Okay. Yeah, so part of the requirements that we had for the camera, it had to be small because it was fitting in these little spaces. This one has the Metabones adapter to Contax Yashica mount. So that's one of the cool things that I love about the camera is because it's a mirrorless camera, you have access to all these different adapters. So I started like looking at all these old lenses online. So this is like a Carl Zeiss lens from like the 1930s. And I love old lenses and old glass. So like this is a 40 millimeter and this actually covers full frame, even though it's a tiny little lens. So like I've basically been blowing all my money on eBay buying lenses. And this is a Contax G2 mount for like the old Contax.
Brand mount is that?
This one is the Tech Art version 3 that allows the autofocus to work with that. So this is like an old. It's not that old, but it's a autofocus for the Contax G2 rangefinder. So and then if you really want to get nerdy, this strap that I got is actually, the company is called A7, which is funny. So
Nice.
and they make really cool straps, so I bought that. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that I bought it was like, you know, I have this thing and it can switch into APS-C mode where it crops in. So if you you can put a PL mount on it, and then it's like a little director's finder, basically. So you can put, if you're shooting with the Alexa or whatever, you can put a PL mount adapter on this and throw your lenses on there, put it in APS-C mode, and then you have a little director's finder that you can record. It's like previs, basically, you know. Walk around, find the shot, that kind of thing. And it has like, you can pull up frame lines in there, so you can do 2:3:5 aspect ratio frame lines and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I kind of fell in love with the camera, as you can see. So, but yeah, I mean, we're doing some kind of cool stuff with it. Like, you know, it's a full frame camera, so you have this really shallow depth of field, which is kind of counterintuitive to a security camera. But what we're doing is basically, I'm tested it in that whole extensive test process, and started at like 3200 ISO. And basically went in one-stop increments, increasing the ISO all the way up to like 126,000 ISO. But the one that we're actually shooting the movie on is 51,200 ISO, which is crazy. So like, basically what I was looking at was the amount of like grain and noise that felt like it was a security camera. And I actually liked the noise level at one stop higher, which is like 126,000 ISO. But I figured the studio might not like that, so we can always add noise in the DI. But so at 51,000 ISO, it's actually pretty clean. Like you know, everybody's so used to with digital cameras, like seeing completely clean, you know, grain or noise-free images. But you know, I think it feels like 35 millimeter, like 500 ISO film, 35 millimeter. Yeah. And I'll probably actually add grain to it in post, but by shooting that high ISO, it adds grain, so it looks more like a security camera, and then it also allows us to close down to an f8 on the lens, so everything is in focus, so it doesn't feel like a full frame camera.
Well,
so
the fact that you are considering adding grain or adding noise,
yeah,
and you're shooting at 51,000 ISO, is,
yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
I'm sure if you guys are familiar with the camera, I'm sure you've seen online, there's this one clip, it's like Moonlight, it's on Vimeo, but it's basically these guys shot with the a7S just on a full moon, and it looks like magic hour, like it looks like it's kind of bizarre, but I think they shot it like 12,000 ISO or something around there, but it's it's a super clean camera for that high an ISO. And the other night, it was, I think a couple weeks ago, it was a full moon, so that the moonlight was coming in through the window in my room, and I turned the camera on and looked, and it was like the full moon was basically lighting to exposure. It's
When you
crazy.
mentioned when you tested it, you used like a lighter and your iPhone.
I
light,
can't show
right?
the test because it's in the actual location of the thing, but one of the tests I did was at the 51,000 ISO. We're using the Metabones adapter to Canon EF lenses, so we have the
16 to 35.
Yeah, 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 L series lenses for the shoot. So it's like the wide angle security camera look. But basically, so I put it at a 2.8 on the lens, and at 51,000 ISO, I had just a big lighter, and it was basically like lighting my face to like a half stop overexposed, And so I walked around this huge house. It's like big open area, like 40-foot living room, this giant house, and it was like lighting the whole house to exposure. And then I pulled out my iPhone and put the little LED light on the iPhone, and that was just lighting the house. It's crazy. And so I flipped the screen on my iPhone on and just put like in the email mode or whatever, and was like lighting my face like this. It was, anyway, it's nutty.
Well, and that also helps you set the settings for the FS700, right? Because you're mentioning as far as being able to match cameras.
Yeah, so the with the FS700, that we're using that for this camera that they find in the story, because kind of the 35 millimeter depth of field was something that we wanted to incorporate for that particular camera, and so we have the what is it, the Fujinon 19 to 90 lens for it, so that we can, the camera that they find is basically like an old E&G style camera. So I kind of wanted to set up the FS700 in that same way, so it had the same feel. It would be on your shoulder. It would be E&G style with the zoom lens. So basically, I operate that because it's a little bit big for the actors to operate. So, but we have a follow focus set up, and I'm pulling my own focus, so it has that kind of documentary feel to it, and I'm zooming in and that kind of thing, like E&G style, documentary camera. But anyway, so one of the cool things about the FS700 is it's really good in low light too. So basically, just with this camera at a 51,000 ISO, shooting at an f8, the equivalent at a 2.8 is 6400 ISO. So then I can basically, on the FS700. So basically, I can light to one exposure level, and this one's shooting at an f8 at that ISO, and then on the FS700, I'm shooting at a 2.8 or a 2.9 with that lens at 6400 ISO. So basically, I light the house to one exposure level, and then it works for all the cameras. So the only with the 200, if we incorporate the 200 into the shot, we have to kind of increase the light levels a little bit, because the way we set it up is we basically did two different gammas, one for daytime and one for nighttime. So in the testing process, I figured out what the equivalent ISO is for all those gain settings on the camera.
Okay.
And then I have it on the back of my light meter, just what each gain setting equivalent ISO is, so I can check. But we have to increase the highest gain setting is equivalent to 1200 ISO, so we have to increase light levels a little bit when we shoot with that camera, but it's not that big a deal. So
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for John?
What was the camera that the actors put down the 200? What is the actual camera that you show?
the one here.
Yeah, you're not going to show that way. You're going to put it down.
Oh yeah,
Is that a
they
handy cam?
yeah they have. So that's a whole another thing. Like the E&G style camera that they find, that's like a prop camera, and we actually there's some times where they'll be in a mirror and they'll be filming themselves. So we took that camera and gutted one of the cameras and put an SI2K in it, so they can basically shoot themselves in the mirror, and and we have like a little SI2K in there with an E&G style lens, so it can be in picture and it all looks fine. But then the other camera, like the director, Greg Plotkin, who edited Paranormal 2 through all the other ones, like he doesn't like showing the cameras on screen. It just has an aversion to it for some reason. Like I think it just draws too much attention to the whole first person thing. So we actually don't see the camera that much on screen. And when we do, it's just, I think it's 1 or 2 times we have, and it's just like a little handy cam basically that we're faking for it. So
Yeah.
When you were testing noise and grain levels at the high ISO, what kind of monitor, projector, how do you test? What size is the screen?
yeah, so we shot the test, and then Photochem is doing the post for the movie. So we went into one of their DI suites, and I watched on a screen bigger than this. So I was shooting in the it's I think PP7 look, which kind of approximates like an S-Log look. So we basically took it to Photochem and then projected it on a screen, like I said, a little bit bigger than this, and we did some color timing to it, and then so that's basically how I watched it. That was one of the important things, is like for all the tests that I did, we watched it on a big screen, because you have to shoot for whatever the format that the project's going to be watched on. If it's going to be an online thing, you should watch it how it's going to ultimately be viewed as the end product. Yeah. So with this film, it's it's going to be in theaters, so we wanted to watch it on a big screen.
Definitely the best way to test, for sure.
Yeah, but it held up, and like I said, even at like at the 51,000 ISO, I probably will still add a little bit of noise to it, because we're basically overlighting it so that we can bring it down in post. And anytime you do that, it kind of helps with all the noise levels. Whereas if you were underlighting it and you had to bring it up, then it gets noisier. So.
Can you talk about a little bit more about how you lit a house that's supposed to be all practical? Like, are you augmenting anything or hiding any fill lights?
Yeah, I mean, like we do have fill lights. This house is kind of the living room is this big open arch ceiling 2-floor behemoth that's like a real bitch to light. So like it's basically practicals on the floor, and then there's like 2 skylights in the house. Actually 3 skylights in the house, and just for lighting continuity's sake, we blacked them out, because if we're shooting in the daytime and you had these skylights, you shoot a scene over like several hours, the light would change drastically. So we blacked them out, but the 2 of the skylights that were on the north and south sides of the house, we put the LED light ribbon in it. I don't know if you're familiar with light gear. They have like the basically rolls of LED ribbon. So we basically just inside that skylight put a bunch of this LED ribbon, and then put like frosted things of plexiglass in front of it. So we basically they're bicolor, so it's basically like 2 giant soft boxes up in the ceiling. So we can adjust tungsten, daylight, and then dim it up and down and that kind of thing. So those are basically acting as our like fill light or moonlight. And then we have a few, like in the very center of the thing, we have a few units rigged up. But that's one of the strange things with this franchise, is even like the studio will be there on set every day, and they have a big presence on the film. So they, like, if they walk into it and see a bunch of movie lights, they're like, why do we have movie lights here? This isn't a real movie. So like, everything that we did had to be hidden, and we would basically, I worked with the production designer to make everything feel like it was architectural. So like in the master bedroom, we put a bunch of LED tubes up in the ceiling, and then he built like a little soffitted thing to make them look like they belong there. So that, and it was basically just like anywhere you could hide a light, we tape up a light or whatever. So, but Yeah,
Well,
but
even the-
everything runs into the dimmer board, so we basically can control all the levels, and everything's programmed there and saved.
I mean, even the production aspect is different than a typical film, right?
Yeah.
As far as filming and then downtime and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like there's really not a whole lot of time to light, and it's not supposed to look manicured or beautiful or anything like that. It's supposed to look rough and
Right.
like a home movie. So but a lot of times we have a 7-year-old actress, so they're limited on the amount of time that you can have them during the day. So like if we have to shoot a night scene, we have to tint out the whole house. So like we shoot day for night, we shoot night for day. So I mean that's where the bigger lighting setups come into play, where we're having to cheat day or night when it's not day or night.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's we, like I said, there's not a whole lot of time to light, so we basically will rehearse and then go right into shooting. So it's like we just have to be quick about it. So.
Yeah. And what you were mentioning about production being heavily involved in it, they review it and then decide and things like that? Right?
Yeah, so like they have a interesting process where they shoot for a period of time and then stop down, edit it, kind of see what they have, and then they'll throw a lot of scenes away and not use them, and then find one scene or two scenes that work really well, and then they'll be like, oh, this is the movie, and then that'll take them in a different direction. So like the script is really just like an outline.
Just a shell.
Yeah. So like last night we finished shooting our first round of pickups. So we shot for 5 weeks, and then we stopped down for like 2 weeks. We shot again this past week for 1 week, and then we're down for a little bit now, and then we'll start shooting I think before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of film production.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like the whole first person thing is an interesting challenge, especially from a cinematography standpoint, because normally you try and think of where's the best place to put the camera for like the emotion of the scene or whatever you want to capture in the scene, but you can't think about it in that way. It's like what's the most realistic, what would make sense, like what do you believe, so you might have a really intense scene and it all takes place from like a camera sitting on a countertop or something, so it's
Well, and have these cameras helped you with that, or have there been any limiting factors, or?
I mean, just the low light capability has been a huge plus because it is lit with practicals. So, we're working at really low light levels. So that's been a huge plus. The size of this has been great because we can hide them, tuck them in these little corners and stuff and put them on bookshelves. And then, the Sony 200, part of why we picked that camera was it is very like easy to use. It's a kind of a prosumer camera. So like the actor can walk around with it and not feel
Weighed
out of place
down
with it.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah. We have time for one more
So
question.
you mentioned something earlier on about the possibility of some 3D work in this later on, though. So how
Yeah.
self-conscious are you now in this process, especially if you're in pickups already?
Mhm.
Is this a daily thought in terms of what you need to do to?
Yeah, I mean, it started out as 3D. Like, I mean, this movie has like I've been basically on the project for like a year now. So, and we started shooting just a couple months ago. But yeah, it started out. It was going to be 3D. So we tested all these cameras. It was it's Paramount is the studio that's doing this film. So. Transformers had just wrapped, so we actually got the cameras from Transformers and did all these 3D tests. But ultimately, it's just like the cameras were so big. It's like a 65-pound 3-ality epic Leica lens rig. So it just doesn't make sense for that type of shooting. So they, they said if it's going to be 3D, they're going to do a post convert. But then we started shooting, and they weren't planning on doing 3D because they wanted to release in Christmas, and it just wasn't enough time to get the 3D ready. So they've pushed the release date back, and now 3D is back on the table. So we have, to answer your question, we have like there's some shots that we were planning that we were now planning to like dimensionalize, where there was like heavy foreground stuff that would be a big problem for 3D. So there's a handful of shots that we are actually reshooting for 3D purposes, just to get rid of the foreground thing, or shoot it in a different way that works better for 3D. Yeah.
For the post conversion.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Okay. I think there was one question here.
Are you worried about this pigeonholing you in this first person, because you said you did another movie like this?
Yeah.
Or do you think the economic success of the franchise keeps you in producer roles? How did you get the agent representation?
The pigeonholing thing is definitely something that's in the back of my mind, but like I'm making a conscious effort to do other films that aren't that. I did that Believe Me film that was like a romantic comedy. I've also done, and that's one like kind of thing with cinematographers in the beginning of their career like I am. It's like horror films are what a lot of people like me do. So I've done a ton of horror films because it's low budget. They're like the only films that kind of you can shoot for $1 million or under and actually make a profit on it. So there's just a lot of horror films out there. So a lot of people like me will start in horror films like I have, and you try and get out of it in some way. But I've just made a conscious effort to do other films, that aren't horror and aren't first person. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, what was the other?
Your representation.
Oh, that I had a film, the Lovely Molly film, that got into the Toronto Film Festival. So it was like around that time. It's like a friend of a friend at this one agency, and I had a meeting, and then the meeting went well, and then basically I, on my own, separate from the agency, booked like 2 jobs in a row, and so I kind of, went through the agency with those jobs, and it kind of started, I guess, off on the right foot, and then I've been with those guys since then. So.
Well, John, thanks a lot for coming.
Cool.
I really appreciate it.